There's a particular kind of public scandal the internet never gets tired of. A marriage falls apart. An affair is rumored. Private emotion becomes public spectacle. Old interview resurface. Everyone suddenly becomes a relationship expert. But beneath the gossip is usually something much deeper. Because these stories force us to confront uncomfortable questions most people quietly wrestle with in private. Can someone betray you and still love you? Can emotional connection justify disloyalty? Is cheating always proof that love never existed? Or are human beings far more emotionally contradictory than we like to admit? And maybe the most uncomfortable question of all, have we become a culture that value emotional fulfillment more than integrity? Welcome back to Authors and Agendas. Today we're using a recent public relationship controversy as a case study, not to gossip about individuals, but to examine what modern relationships reveal about love, loneliness, desire, morality, and the stories we tell ourselves about the heart. Because sometimes public scandals expose private truths society doesn't want to face. One of the reasons this particular controversy captured so much attention is because it involved public commentary about infidelity long before the alleged betrayal became personal. And that's always fascinating to watch because people often speak about cheating philosophically until they experience it emotionally. It is very easy to intellectualize betrayal from a distance. People say things like, men cheat differently, people can love multiple people, cheating is just physical, love and loyalty are separate. And maybe sometimes those statements contains partial truths. But theories sound very different once pain enters the room, once humiliation enters the room, once your own marriage, family, reputation, or emotional security becomes the casualty. That's when relationship philosophy collides with emotional reality. And honestly, that collision reveals something important about human nature. Many of us think we understand betrayal until we are betrayed. This is the question at the center of many heated debates online. And people answer it emotionally depending on which side of betrayal they have experienced. Some people say, if you love someone, you would never cheat. Others say, people make selfish decisions while genuinely loving their partner. And the uncomfortable truth is, both statements contain elements of reality. Because love does not automatically make someone disciplined. Love does not automatically heal emotional immaturity. Love does not automatically remove selfishness, insecurity, ego, loneliness, temptation, or dysfunction. Human beings are fully capable of loving someone and still hurting them. Parents do it to children. Friends do it to each other. Partners do it in marriages. Love alone is not the same thing as character. And I think that's where modern culture gets confused. We have reduced love almost entirely to feeling, intensity, chemistry, emotional connection, passion, validation, being seen. But historically, spiritually, morally, culturally, love was understood as more than emotion. Love was also restraint, responsibility, discipline, sacrifice, integrity. The modern world increasingly treats emotions as truth. If it feels real, we assume it must be right. But feelings can be real and still lead people into destruction. That is one of the hardest truths about being human. One thing people rarely talk about honestly is why affairs often feel emotionally overwhelming. And it's important to understand this because many people mistake intensity for destiny. Affairs often exist outside ordinary life, outside bills, outside parenting stress, outside routine, outside responsibility. They exist inside emotional fantasy, inside secrecy, inside anticipation, inside escape. And forbidden things often feel more emotionally electric precisely because they are forbidden. Sometimes the affair partner isn't competing with the actual marriage, they are competing with the exhaustion, resentment, emotional distance, monotony, and the unresolved pain inside the marriage. That changes the emotional dynamic completely. A person who feels emotionally invisible at home may suddenly feel alive when someone else notices them. And that feeling can become intoxicating. Not necessarily because the connection is deeper, but because it temporarily relieves emotional starvation. And this is where nuance matters. Understanding vulnerability is not the same thing as excusing betrayal. But if we refuse to understand why people become emotionally susceptible, we will never understand modern relationships honestly. We live in an era that worships emotional fulfillment. Everywhere you look, people are told, choose yourself, follow your heart, pursue happiness, protect your peace, go where you feel alive, never deny your truth. And while some of those ideas contain wisdom, they can also become dangerous when detached from responsibility and morality. Because not every emotionally intense connection is sacred. Some connections are simply mirrors reflecting our unmet needs. Loneliness can feel like love. Validation can feel like destiny. Escape can feel like freedom. Desire can disguise itself as authenticity. Modern culture rarely teaches people how to sit inside dissatisfaction without destroying everything around them. And this is where relationships becomes complicated. Because sometimes people aren't looking for another person, they are looking for another version of themselves. The version that feels desired again, alive again, interesting again, chosen again. And another person becomes the vehicle for that emotional resurrection. Now, this is the part many people avoid because it makes the conversation uncomfortable. Sometimes betrayal grows in an environment where emotional neglect already exists. That does not justify cheating, but it does complicate simplistic narratives. These are people inside marriages who feel profoundly alone. People who feel unseen for years, unheard for years, unwanted for years. Some couples stop being emotionally intimate long before physical betrayal ever happens. And honestly, many marriages survive legally while dying emotionally. That is real. Sometimes people don't leave relationships because they stopped loving their spouse. Sometimes they leave because they no longer recognize themselves inside the relationship. And when another connection suddenly makes them feel emotionally visible again, it can create powerful confusion, especially in a culture that equates emotional intensity with truth. Here's where I personally think the deeper issue lies. The question isn't simply, were the feelings real? The more important question is, what kind of love survives only in secrecy? Because even if emotions are genuine, betrayal changes the moral context of a relationship. Love without honesty becomes manipulation. Love without accountability becomes selfishness. Love without integrity eventually leaves destructions behind. And this is why cheating creates such deep emotional trauma, not simply because of sex, but because betrayal fractures reality. The lies, the secrecy, the divided loyalties, the humiliation, the rewriting of trust. That damage lingers long after feelings fade, which is why I think we need a more mature understanding of love. Not just love as emotional experience, but love as ethical responsibility. Maybe the tragedy of modern relationships is not that people fall in love outside committed relationships. Maybe the tragedy is that we now believe feelings alone are enough to justify the damage done in their name. And maybe that's why so many people are emotionally confused. Because we have been taught to trust the heart without questioning whether the heart itself is healthy, disciplined, honest, or wise. So now the real question is not whether betrayal can contain genuine feelings. The real question is, can love fully exist where integrity is absent? I'll let you sit with that. This has been Authors and Agendas. See you in the next episode.